Am I visible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're very much, sir.
Dr. Nagesh Reddy, are you able to hear?
Yes, sir. I am able to hear.
Why is it not there?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nageshwar, sir, your voice is there. So I think Balraj, sir, will you rejoin,
Dr.
sir?
Balraj
Nagesh
sir is
Reddy,
not able to hear
your
me.
voice, I think you're muted.
So, Balraj, sir, can you hear me, sir? Sir, Balraj, sir, it's I think.
Hello?
Hello, Balraj,
Hello?
sir. It's a
Dr.
problem
Nagesh
from
Reddy,
your
Hello?
I'm
end, sir.
unable to hear.
Sir, I am able to hear you, sir. This is Nageshwar Reddy here.
Your voice is not reaching.
Sir, it is there, sir. It is there, sir. Nageshwar, sir, it is there for your voice is there. I think Balraj, sir, can't hear us, sir.
Sir, is it okay now, sir? Balraj sir, I am able to hear you, sir. సార్ మీది వినిపిస్తుంది నాకు
వినపడుతుందా
అదే నాది మీకు వినిపించట్లేదు అంటే అక్కడ ఏదో ప్రాబ్లం ఉన్నట్టు సార్
అదే మేము ఇక్కడ చూస్తున్నాము ఇది నాది వినపడుతుంది కదా సో మీరు మొదలెట్టేద్దరు అయితే నేను చెప్తాను నేను ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేస్తాను మిమ్మల్ని
సరే సార్ వీడియో నాది కనిపిస్తుంది సార్
వీడియో కనపడుతుంది వీడియో కనపడుతుంది మీది నాకు వాయిస్ వినపడట్లేదు మేబీ నాకు వినపడకపోయినా పర్వాలేదు మిగిలిన వాళ్ళకి వినపడితే నేను చెప్పేస్తాను
షేర్ స్క్రీన్ చేయాలన్నాను షేర్ ఇది చేసి దీని మీద షేర్ అనేది కదా సార్ షేర్ కొట్టగానే షేర్ అయిపోతుంది ఇంకా అంతవరకు అది చెప్తాను.
Hello, Dr. Reddy. Hello.
Hello.
Sir, I can hear you, sir. I think Dr. Balraj, you can't hear us, sir.
So should we?
Sir, no, sir. The problem is not from your end, sir. I think Balraj sir's systems are some problem.
My dear students,
You don't need to do anything.
Dear
sir.
colleagues, today on behalf of the ANBI, the regular teaching classes are being conducted, and then I got the pleasure of introducing Dr. Nageshwar Reddy, the consultant nephrologist from Yashoda Hospital, Somajiguda. He is DM nephrology, and he did his DM nephrology from Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences, Hyderabad. And before that, before 2004 to 2005, he was a senior registrar in the Department of Neurology, Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences. And he did his MD Pediatrics from Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, Chandigarh. And he is going to talk on the acute renal failure, acute kidney injury, and it is a very, very important topic for the standpoint of view of students as well as regular practice. And without wasting further time, I request Dr. Nageshwar Reddy, with his vast experience and then publications, a standing of more than 15 years, I request him to deliver the topic, the speech on acute renal failure or acute kidney injury. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, all the participants, colleagues, and my teachers. I thank the organization, Dr. Balraj sir, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on acute kidney injury today. So this is a very important topic as the incidence of acute kidney injury is increasing, especially in the ICU settings, in hospital settings. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Yeah. So today's topic is acute kidney injury, approach to acute kidney injury. this term has come into existence after 2007. Previously, it was like the term was called as acute renal failure, which has been replaced with the term acute kidney injury from 2007 onwards with a uniform definition released by KDIGO and ADQI. So it's acute kidney injury. It's not a single disease entity, but it's a heterogeneous syndrome, which is defined by rapid, which means hours to days, rapid decline of GFR, resulting in the retention of metabolic waste products, including urea and creatine, along with dysregulation of fluid, electrolyte, and acid-base hemostasis. Usually, AKI is manifested by its cardinal manifestation, which is decreased in the urine output. Predominantly, majority of the patients will be oliguric, but we can also see non-oliguric AKI. So oliguric is less than 400 ml per day of urine output, and uric is less than 100 ml per day of urine output. So as I said, AKI has come into existence because of this Reifel criteria in 2004. Before that, there were plenty of almost 30 to 40 definitions of AKI. So there was no uniformity among the trials. So Reifel criteria has come up in 2004, which has been refined by AKIN in 2007. After taking out the limitations of Reifel criteria to make it as a definition like, so it is defined as stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, both definition and prognostic classification has been included in the definition of AKI. So stage 1 is increase of creatine by more than 0.3 milligram per deciliter above the baseline value, or 1.5 to 1.9 times above the baseline value, whereas stage 2 is defined as a creatine rise more than 2 to 3 times above the baseline, and AKI stage 3 has been defined as increase in creatine more than 3 above the baseline, or any value above 4, or any condition in AKI where RRT has been initiated is defined as AKI stage 3. The urine output, this is the criteria for serum creatine based definition, whereas in the urine output criteria, both Reifel criteria, Akin criteria and KDIGO criteria has the same uniform definition of less than urine output less than 0.5 ml per kg per hour for more than 6 hours, more than 12 hours, and more than 24 hours. So after this AKI definition from the KDIGO, majority of the trials have been included this AKI definition in their studies, giving uniformity to the studies and its outcomes. Although there are little bit limitations in the AKI, very few limitations are there. So even though the studies have demonstrated that AKI stages correlate with the mortality risk, it is not clear that this is the appropriate metric for assessing the validity of definition of AKI. And also there is a poor correlation between AKI stage and GFR. So in spite of AKI being proved, because the GFR decrease in GFR is at the precedes the increase in serum creatine by almost 24 to 36 hours. And definition of AKI by serum creatine criteria alone is not always reliable, because some baseline serum creatine is not available always, and also the serum creatine measurements across various labs give fallacies. So even though AKI criteria is dependent on serum creatinine and urine output, both serum creatine measurements and urine output measurements still have a long way to go in defining AKI. So So there is some concordance between serum creatinine level and urine output criteria. And so this this classification of AKI is independent of the various causes of AKI, like pre-renal, intrinsic, and obstructive AKI. So whereas pre-renal AKI gives good prognosis, post-renal AKI gives good prognosis, but intrinsic renal failure has its own mortality risk factors and outcome factors. So despite these shortcomings, the use of standardized classification scheme has enhanced the interpretation of the epidemiological studies and the design of clinical trials, so that we are getting good trials in AKI for the regarding the studies of benefit of starting AKI, or the studies basing the AKI definition on the outcomes. So coming to the epidemiology of AKI, usually AKI is seen in predominantly in the developing countries, and AKI burden is very huge. It's a major global healthcare challenge with almost 13.3 million cases every year. The incidence is very huge, and this burden is particularly high in the developing countries like India, where the annual among all the causes, AKI cause is almost coming to 11.3 million cases per year. So we can see this in 5 to 10% of the hospitalized patients, and the incidence increases to almost 70% when you see when you are coming to only critically ill patients. And among these patients, up to 6% of the ICU patients will require renal replacement therapy. So once AKI has occurred and renal replacement therapy is required, the cost of the treatment is prohibitively very high. So the lot of emphasis is being placed on prevention of AKI rather than treating AKI. So over the past many years, the incidence of non-dialysis AKI and dialysis AKI is going on increasing in the last 4 decades. Every decade it is increasing by leaps and bounds. This is all because of the increase in the ICU care, more and more people reaching ICU, more and more sepsis cases increasing. So the incidence of both non-dialysis AKI and dialysis requiring AKI is increasing every year. So this is a huge global burden. So why should we study about AKI? Because AKI contributes significantly to the mortality. So 33% of the patients requiring dialysis have mortality compared to just 4.6% of patients without AKI. So almost 6 times the mortality rates. So in hospital mortality is high, 90-day mortality rate is also high. So whereas 12.1% with patients of the ICU with no AKI has mortality at 90 days compared to almost 50% of the mortality. So compared to other causes like infection, cancer, GI disturbance, the incidence of mortality is almost 6.5 times odds ratio. So this is a significant, so we should try to prevent AKI rather than treating AKI. That is the emphasis more placed on preventing AKI. So AKI is divided into basing on the pathophysiological categories. Pre-renal AKI is characterized by effective hypoperfusion of the kidneys, in which there is no actual parenchymal damage to the kidney. Whereas intrinsic AKI or the diseases involving the renal parenchyma, and prolonged pre-renal AKI can go into intrinsic renal intrinsic AKI. The third etiologies are useful for didactic purposes and help in inform the initial clinical assessment of the patients presenting with EKA. There is often a degree of overlap between these two categories, especially the prerenal AKA and intrinsic AKA. So as I said, prerenal azotemia, important causes are hypovolemia, cardiac failure, hepatorenal syndrome. The hypovolemia because of blood loss, diarrhea and vomiting, upper GI losses and lower GI causes. And post-renal causes, bladder outer obstruction because of tumors, renal caliculi, bilateral papillary renal necrosis, retroperitoneal fibrosis. All this can cause post-renal AKI. Intrinsic renal AKI, intrinsic AKI is again divided into multiple causes basing on the site of anatomical involvement. So large vessel involvement renal artery causing renal artery occlusion or large vessel vasculitis. So coming to glomerular causes like small vessel vasculitis, thrombotic microangiopathy, renal atherosclerosis, proper glomerular diseases like lupus, anti-GBM disease, other glomerulonephritis, post-infectious GN, infective endocarditis, MPGN, and IgA nephropathy. All these can cause intrinsic AKI. And coming to the important cause like acute tubular necrosis, where the tubule is involved, number one cause of intrinsic renal AKI is ATN. Causes of ATN are again ischemic, nephrotoxin, rhabdomyolysis, and radiocontrast agents. So acute interstitial nephritis in the form of drugs, infection, and systemic disease also can cause intrinsic ATN with AKI.
మనం చేయలేకపోతే వదిలేయాలి. మనల్ని మనం ఎలా చూసుకోగలం ఇది ఆలోచిస్తున్నప్పుడు ఆ స్ట్రెంగ్త్ వస్తుంది.
So again, causes of prerenal acute kidney injury, as I said, volume, intravascular volume depletion because of hemorrhage, GI losses, reduced cardiac output, systemic vasodilatation, sepsis in the initial part, cirrhosis, renal vasoconstriction in early sepsis, hepatorenal syndrome, hypercalcemia, and drugs affecting the renal autoregulation like ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting ARBs, and NSAIDs. This is again the same table which is shown in the diagram. So regarding the causes of post-renal AKI, extrinsic compression because of lymph nodes, tumors, cervical cancer, radiation, fibrosis because of inflammation, drugs and radiation, granulomatous diseases of the retroperitoneum, hematoma, upper urinary tract, intrinsic causes like renal stones, strictures, edema, papillary necrosis, and fungal infections. And lower urinary tract compressions predominantly in the elderly age group because of prostate and bladder cancer. So in the community, predominantly AKI in India is 50% in the urban centers is because of hospital acquired AKI. Another 50% is because of community acquired AKI. Whereas in rural centers, it is predominantly community acquired AKI rather than hospital acquired AKI. So causes of community acquired AKI is different from hospital acquired AKI. In hospital acquired AKI, intrarenal causes are predominantly number one causes. Second comes the pre-renal causes, and post-renal causes comes the distant triad. Whereas in the hospital acquired AKI, it's the ATN which is the number one cause. So, coming to AKI in the developing world, the causes are more region specific, like snake bite envenomation because of spiders, bees, infectious diseases like malaria, leptospirosis, and crush injuries because of disasters. along with the previous causes which I have elicited. Coming to the, as I said, in the pre-renal AKA, the predominant cause of AKA is autoregulation impairment. Because of hypovolemia, when the systolic blood pressure is less than 80, there will be acute decrease in the GFR, causing pre-renal AKA. There won't be any systemic or intrinsic renal damage because of this pre-renal AKA. Once we correct the hypovolemia, majority of the pre-renal causes of AKA will reverse back. Prolonged pre-renal AKA can go into intrinsic AKA because of ischemic ATN. Whereas a pathophysiology of ATN responsible for the most common causes of hospital acquired AKA is usually the result of ischemia plus nephrotoxicity or a combination of these both. In the ICU, 2/3 of the cases of AKA are due to combination of impaired renal perfusion, which is seen in predominant AKI, pre-renal AKI, sepsis, and nephrotoxic agents. So the number one site, which is the first site to involve in ATN, is the S3 segment of the proximal tubule and the medullary thick ascending limb, which is very much vulnerable to the hypoxic injury because of the combination of borderline oxygen supply and high metabolic demands. So as you go into the medulla, the PO2 decreases. So this is the borderline area where the metabolic demand is very high and the supply of oxygen is moderate. So this is the first site which gets affected in ATN. So for the development of ATN, there should be impaired autoregulation. There is some amount of intrarenal vasoconstriction, tubuloglomerular feedback, and endothelial injury, decreased nitric oxide synthesis, endothelial swelling, upregulation of adhesion molecules, especially in sepsis. All this will cause hypoxia, intrarenal vasoconstriction, increase in the reactive oxygen. All this will cause decreased GFR in ATN. So ischemia and nephrotoxins causing release of inflammatory mediators, increase in the vascular endothelial cell injury, tubular cell injury causing cast formation, obstruction, tubular leak, glomerular feedback mechanism, decreased GFR causing oliguria. So this is the histology of the ATN of the tubule. So the normal tubular lumen has a brush border, whereas in the ATN, there will be first sign of in the histology is loss of brush border. And there will be loss of polarity of the cells. There will be destruction of the cells causing tubular cast and back leak into the interstitium. So this is a pathophysiology of sepsis AKA is almost similar to what I have discussed. So hemodynamic factors, immunological factors, and vasoconstriction, all these will cause ATN in the kidney. Coming to sepsis associated AKI, it occurs in 10 to 20% of all patients admitted to ICU, and almost 50 to 70% of those with septic shock. Sepsis associated AKI is the most common cause of AKI in the ICU, accounting for almost 50% of the cases. And septic associated AKI is associated with dramatically worse outcomes with increased mortality rate. So role of inflammation in sepsis causing ATN and AKI. So all the pattern damage associated molecular patterns, pathogen associated molecular patterns, all these are filtered near the glomeruli, and this cause inflammation near the tubules, causing ATN. So prevention of sepsis induced AKI. More emphasis should be placed on prevention of sepsis induced AKI rather than treating sepsis induced AKI. So identify high risk patients who are prone to get sepsis induced AKI, like elderly patients, like diabetic patients. Discontinue all the nephrotoxic agents when possible. Ensure good volume status and perfusion pressure more than mean arterial pressure more than 80. Consider functional hemodynamic monitoring and regularly monitor serum creatinine and urine output. Avoid hyperglycemia and avoid radio contrast procedures and avoid certain drugs which can cause AKI. So AKI is a syndrome where the ATN causing AKI has distant effects on the lung, causing volume overload, increased vascular permeability and pulmonary edema. So AKI also has an effect on the brain, causing uremic encephalopathy, blood-brain barrier permeability increase and release of pro-inflammatory cytokines in the brain. Also, AKI has an effect on the heart, causing cardiorenal syndrome. It can cause volume overload. It can cause myocyte apoptosis. So, AKI effect on the kidney, causing sepsis, malnutrition, nausea, and bone marrow suppression. Mechanism of nephrotoxic agent causing toxicity. So prolonged dosing periods and nephrotoxic drugs exposure, both drug factors and patient factors cause predisposition to drug nephrotoxicity. Combination of certain drugs like aminoglycosides and vancomycin, insoluble drugs causing crystal deposition. These are the drug characteristics which can cause drug nephrotoxicity. Certain patient factors like female sex, old age, cirrhosis, obstructive jaundice, CKD patients, volume depleted patients. These are the patient factors which predispose an individual to nephrotoxic ATN. Coming to special situation of contrast associated AKI, KDIGO has defined contrast induced AKI as increase in serum creatinine by 0.3 within 48 hours or urine volume less than 0.5 ml per kg per hour for 6 hours after contrast exposure. Where there is no alternative etiology, so pathophysiology of contrast induced AKI is as soon as the contrast media is introduced into the body, there will be increased viscosity, decreased medullary perfusion, decreased tubular flow, causing glomerular filtration, decreased glomerular filtration rate. Also, contrast media can cause cytotoxicity, endothelial tubular injury, increased production of reactive oxygen species and decreased nitric oxide causing vasoconstriction. All this will cause medullary ischemia and decreased GFR. So how to prevent contrast associated AKI? Consider alternative imaging not requiring contrast like MRI without contrast. Stop nephrotoxic drugs at least 24 hours before the contrast exposure. If possible, avoid multiple exposures. Should be delayed for 48 hours in patients without risk factors for contrast-induced AKI, for 72 hours in those with diabetes mellitus or pre-existing CKD. So the risk of arterial administration of contrast is more compared to venous administration. So use lowest possible dose of contrast, and contrast agent either isoosmolar or low osmolar agent is preferable compared to hyperosmolar agent. So there is some data regarding statins prevention of contrast associated AKI if you use statins. This is a small note about the aminoglycoside causing AKI. So aminoglycosides are usually excreted by GFR. Aminoglycosides accumulate in the proximal tubular cells and can reach 100 to 1000 times their serum concentration. So non-oliguric AKI usually occurs after 5 to 10 days of treatment with gentamicin or similar drugs. It can involve the distal tubular segments and produce polyuria, potassium, and magnesium wasting. The risk of AKI because of aminoglycosides in proximal tubular cells is related to the daily dose and duration of therapy. Additional risk factors for gentamicin toxicity usually include increasing age, pre-existing CKD, hypotensive patient, concomitant liver disease, sepsis, and other concurrent nephrotoxins like vancomycin. So simultaneous treatment with vancomycin can potentiate the aminoglycoside nephrotoxicity. Compared to gentamicin, amikacin has fewer groups and can cause less nephrotoxicity, but it should be avoided, and alternative agent has to be seen in patients who are elderly, who are having a pre-existing renal disease, and who are already on other concurrent nephrotoxins. So endogenous nephrotoxins like heme pigment nephropathy. Heme pigment nephropathy is a very common cause of AKI and usually secondary to breakdown of muscle or intracellular contents, particularly myoglobin. Less commonly, heme pigment nephropathy may occur because of massive intravascular hemolysis. What are the associated features which we see in myoglobinuria? Myoglobinuric AKI. There will be muscle injury, pressure necrosis. These are all the causes of myoglobinuric AKI. Seizures, toxins like alcohol, heroin, drugs like high doses statins, fibrates, zidovudine, neuroepileptic malignant syndrome, azathioprine, and high doses of diuretics, electrolyte disorders like severe hypophosphatemia, prolonged and severe hypokalemia, hyperosmolar states, infections with HIV, COVID, all these can cause rhabdomyolysis. Other causes like hypothyroidism, polymyositis, and dermatomyositis also can cause myoglobinuric AKI. So myoglobinuric AKI can cause muscle injury, and myoglobin has a direct toxic effect on the tubule, and muscle injury also can initiate inflammatory cascade, fluid sequestration causing volume depression, renal hypoperfusion, and inflammatory cascade can cause renal vasoconstriction. Myoglobin also can cause intraluminal cask obstruction, and myoglobin also can increase reactive oxygen species, heme protein mediated tubular toxicity. All these cause ATN because of myoglobin. So main step in preventing AKI after traumatic rhabdomyolysis and crush syndrome is early and aggressive fluid therapy. Intravenous isotonic saline should be initiated as early as possible before the crushed limb is relieved at the site of the injury. And fluid should be administered aiming to a target of 200 to 300 ml per hour of urine output. And the recommendations are like use sodium bicarbonate to maintain alkali urine so that there is a decreased precipitation of myoglobin and arterial vasoconstriction because of increased alkaline. Mannitol has been suggested to be beneficial because of both of its diuretic effect, antioxidant, and vasodilatory properties. In treating patients with rhabdomyolysis, it is important to consider when to stop fluid resuscitation. General recommendation is to stop when creatine kinase levels decrease to less than 5,000 units and myoglobinuria disappears. So renal replacement therapy should be considered in resistant hyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis, rapidly rising serum creatinine, severe oliguria, or volume overload. So coming to the diagnosis and clinical evaluation of acute kidney injury. So definition of AKI is based on increases in serum creatinine, yet when used as a marker of serum concentration has multiple limitations. So first the GFR decreases and the window of time exists in which kidney injury goes undetected until the serum creatinine rises. So there is a lag period of 8 to 48 hours when there is a insult to the kidney, drop in GFR and increase in serum creatinine. So there is a decrease in GFR and there is a window period of 4 to 48 hours between decrease in GFR and increase in serum creatinine. So this time period is important in causing the serum marker to have a fallacy in detecting the AKI. So this is where the biomarkers are coming to picture to detect early AKI. So these biomarkers are TIM2, tissue inhibitor of metalloproteinase 2, IGFB7. These are the two important markers, and another functional marker like cystatin C, which increases comparatively a little bit early compared to serum creatinine. So all these newer biomarkers also help in prognostication of the AKI, to detect early AKI and to start treatment preventing further deterioration of AKI and to initiate early RRT if you seem to see that AKI is going to worsen in the next few days. Coming to the evaluation of a patient with AKI, once you diagnose there is an AKI. So as usual of all the other causes, AKI also needs meticulous history and physical examination, comprehensive records, review of the medical record. You should evaluate the urinary findings, urinary sediment, and laboratory tests. Renal imaging, especially ultrasound abdomen, CT scan, KUB, will help in diagnosing post-renal AKI. When appropriate, kidney biopsy may be needed. So how will you detect volume depletion? So you should look for orthostatic hypotension, that is decrease in systolic blood pressure by more than 20 or diastolic blood pressure by more than 10, and tachycardia, which is rise in heart rate by more than 10 beats per minute when the patient stands up. Reduced JVP, diminished skin turgor, dry mucous membrane, and absence of axillaries. All these are the clinical signs which you can see and distinguish a patient with AKI because of pre-renal AKI compared to intrinsic causes of AKI. In some of the cases where the baseline creatinine is not available, there will be a certain query between whether the patient is having acute kidney injury or chronic kidney disease. So factors that suggest chronicity include longer duration of the symptoms, history of nocturia, absence of any acute illness, patient being predominantly asymptomatic, gross anemia present in the patient, hyperphosphatemia and hypocalcemia. All these are the factors which tell that the patient may be having CKD, on that he may be having acute deterioration. Also small kidneys and ultrasound, previous serum creatinine reports, if the patient has a previous medical history, all this help in determining that the patient is having CKD rather than AKI as a cause of increased creatinine. So some patients may have flank pain because of distension of the renal capsule, especially interstitial edema and acute interstitial nephritis in about 1/3 of the patients. And eye examination also is useful in assessing the signs of atheroembolism, diabetic retinopathy, uveitis, chronic liver disease, band keratopathy. So differentiating the two most common causes of AK in hospital patients, pre-renal ATN may be difficult when both effective arterial blood volume and time course of the kidney injury are unknown. So pre-renal azotemia and intrinsic AKI will be recognized by measuring urine osmolality, urine sodium level, fractional excretion of sodium and fractional excretion of urea. So urine osmolality more than 500 is suggestive of pre-renal azotemia, where less than 400 is suggestive of intrinsic AKI. Fractional excretion of sodium less than 1 is suggestive of pre-renal AKI. More than 2 is suggestive of intrinsic AKI. Urinary sediment being normal is suggestive of pre-renal AKI, whereas urinary sediment causing showing granular cast, tubular cast is suggestive of AKI because of the post-renal AKI because of the ATN. So all these urinary indices will go a long way in predicting and differentiating AKI from ATN, especially, but it may not be always feasible in cases of sepsis. So urinary microscopy also is helpful in determining the cause of AKI, especially in AKI because of ATN. So there will be no CAS in pre-renal AKI or very few CAS in pre-renal AKI, arterial thromboembolism, HUS, scleroderma crisis involving the vasculitis. RBC CAS, if present in the urine, is suggestive more of glomerulonephritis, vasculitis, malignant hypertension, and TMA. Whereas WBC CAS in a patient with AKI is suggestive of interstitial nephritis, glomerulonephritis, allograft rejection, or malignant infiltration of the kidney. Pigment CAS is associated with myoglobinuria, hemoglobinuria, and allograft rejection. Eosinophilic CAS or eosinophilia is associated with and atheroembolic renal disease. Crystal presence in the urine of AK patient is suggestive of acute uric acid nephropathy, and also you have to suspect drugs causing AK like acyclovir, sulfadiazine, and amoxicillin. These are the few diagrams where RBC CAS predominantly seen in glomerulonephritis, pigmented CAS because of ATN, eosinophilic CAS and eosinophilia because of interstitial nephritis. Coming to the laboratory evaluation of AK because of systemic illness, serum complement levels of C3, C4 are very useful in differentiating causes of GN when biopsy is not feasible. In the appropriate clinical settings, you have to order complete blood count, hemoglobin, serum albumin, urine myoglobinuria, cryoglobulins. If you have a suspicion of AK because of intrinsic causes of AK, especially the glomerular causes. Imaging studies are helpful in evaluating both the cause and severity of AK, especially post-renal AK. Kidney imaging may not be necessary if clear diagnosis of AK exists, especially in pre-renal AK and ATN. However, when the diagnosis is uncertain, especially if urinary obstruction or renovascular occlusion are suspected or patient is having anuria, imaging is always indicated. So renal ultrasound can identify urinary obstruction, polycystic kidney disease, size of the kidneys, and number of the kidneys. And Doppler assessment is useful for renal artery and renal vein thrombosis. And high resolution non-contrast CT imaging is helpful for detection of urinary tract calculi. Better to avoid the contrast medium in these situations where patient is in AKI. Kidney biopsy in AKI is very rarely performed. It's indicated when you are having an AKI which is not improving even beyond 3 to 4 weeks. Patient is continuously having anuria and you have excluded post-renal cause as a cause of AKI. So whenever there is suspicion in the form of RBC cast in the urine, proteinuria of more than 1 gram, or AKI is associated with systemic illnesses like vasculitis, SLE, or if you are suspecting drug-induced AKN, these are the clear-cut indications when you will do a kidney biopsy in AKI. Otherwise, majority of the cases, like 80% of the cases, need not require kidney biopsy. Coming to the prognosis of AKI. Multiple studies have shown that AKI is more common in older individuals, and it has shown to an independent association between AKI and older age. Pre-existing CKD is a potential risk factor for developing AKI, and pre-existing proteinuria is also strongly associated with the development of AKI. So these are the patient-specific risk factors for development of AKI: older age, male gender, pre-existing CKD, proteinuria, pre-existing diabetes, congestive heart failure, sepsis, volume depletion, pre-existing CLD, hyperuricemia. These are particularly risk factors for developing AKI. So AKI is, as I said previously, is a heterogeneous entity. Some of the AKIs will have a spontaneous recovery. Some of the AKIs will go on to have a CKD, especially if the patient's age is higher, if the baseline GFR is very low, if the patient is having congestive heart failure, if the patient is having hypertension or recurrent AKI, or AKI is very severe, these are the patients which may have CKD on follow-up after an episode of AKI. Small changes in serum creatinine, like 25% above baseline, is a significant predictor of all-cause short-term mortality. AKI was associated with 8-fold increase in the risk of ESRD compared with subjects without AKI. Recurrent episodes of AKI further increase the risk of progressive CKD. Coming to the topic of AKI in the tropics, infections like malaria, leptospirosis, typhoid, hemorrhagic fevers, infective diarrhea, HIV, scrub typhus, Legionnaires disease, chlamydia, all this can cause septic induced AKI. Plant toxins, mushroom, animal poisonings like snake bite, bee, scorpion sting, all this can cause AKI because especially in the tropical countries. And toxins like paraquat, ethylene glycol, copper sulfate, all this can cause severe AKI especially in the tropical countries. An important cause of AKI is the surgical and obstetric cause of AKI, most commonly seen in the developing countries. Small note about AKI snake bites. Snake venoms are a mixture of complex toxins which are neurotoxic, myotoxic, nephrotoxic, and necrotoxic. Nearly all snakes with medical relevance can induce AKI, but predominantly it is because of Russell's viper, Echinus carinatus, and because of the members of the genera Protalus and Bothrops. What is the pathogenesis of AKI in snake bite? Snake venom can cause intense immunological response and also chronic immunological response causing glomerulitis, intense immunological response releasing cytokines, mediators releasing adhesion molecules causing interstitial nephritis, increase in the hemolysis, intravascular DIC, hemorrhage, vasculitis causing decreased renal blood flow, cortical necrosis and tubular necrosis. Also, the venom can cause direct injury to the renal histology. Predominantly, the snake venom can cause acute tubular necrosis, which is the predominant lesion seen in 70% of the patients. Some patients can cause, in some patients, snake venom can cause acute cortical necrosis, especially because of snake bite because of Echinus carinatus. And cortical necrosis appears to be more common among Indian patients. The presence of fibrin thrombi in the arterioles is a predominant feature in these patients. Majority of the cases of acute cortical necrosis has a very bad prognosis. And some of the lesions, glomerular lesions, also can be because of the snake bite, snake toxin, especially proliferative glomerulonephritis, and case reports of Kisentric glomerulonephritis also can be seen. Coming to malaria-induced AKI, frequency of AKI in Plasmodium falciparum might reach up to 60%, and in Plasmodium vivax malaria it can range from 10 to 20%. Other causes of malaria are less common to cause AKI. Why only falciparum causes AKI? Because the infection with falciparum is more severe, producing higher number of merozytes, and it can infect all the erythrocytes, causing hemolysis, decrease in the increased cardiac output, hypervolemia, decreased systemic vascular resistance, and increased renal vascular resistance. What are the clinical manifestations? Sepsis can be seen, and urinalysis usually show erythrocytes, leukocytes, granular casts, and proteinuria up to 1 gram per 24 hours. Complications which are seen in malarial AKI are hyperkalemia, rhabdomyolysis, hemoglobinuria, hypophosphatemia, and hypomagnesemia. And AKI in malaria ranges from 1 to several weeks and is oliguric in almost 60% of the patients. Kidney function may not recover completely in severe AKI, and in some of the patients, up to 70% of the patients, AKI can go on to CKD, especially in severe malaria. Another important cause is leptospirosis in the tropical countries. And leptospirosis is the most common zoonosis caused by Leptospira genus spirochetes. Infection is transmitted accidentally to humans through broken skin or mucosal membranes exposed to water or soil contaminated with these organisms. So kidney involvement is almost universal in leptospirosis, but becomes relevant only in Weil's disease. AKI is typically non-oliguric in leptospirosis and is usually associated with hypokalemia, which is a hallmark of leptospira-associated AKI. And long-term follow-up of leptospira-associated AKI was found to later development of CKD in the form of tubular functional abnormalities and mild rise in serum creatinine. And COVID-19 can cause AKI, as this is the season for COVID-19. There is a direct viral causing cytopathic effects on the tubules and glomeruli. COVID-19 also can cause activation of the cytokine system, cytokine storm, hypercoagulability, microangiopathy, DAC, causing ATN, and it can cause sepsis and indirectly causing ATN. COVID-19 viral invasion of the muscle can cause rhabdomyolysis, which can cause AKI. There are also case reports of collapsing glomerulopathy, podocytopathy, and microangiopathy directly because of the virus. So there are few case reports of TMA caused by COVID-19, which leads to severe AKI and dialysis dependency. So as I was emphasizing, acute kidney injury treatment is managing the complications of AKI, which are predominantly hyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis, fluid overload, dyselectrolytemia, and infections. the cost of treatment for giving support to AKI is very high. So it's the main emphasis is placed on preventing AKI. Coming to the specific dialysis management of AKI in the intensive care is the therapeutic goals for acute renal replacement therapy are not well defined compared to RRT in a CKD patients. So some of the studies say the usual indications like hyperkalemia, uremia, pericardial effusion may not. These are the indications which are traditionally being used for starting dialysis in a CKD patients, which may not be truly necessary to wait in a patients with AKI. So the renal replacement therapy is completely different in a AKI patient compared to CKD patient. So in a CKD patient, the RRT is called renal replacement therapy, where you start if there is hyperkalemia, pulmonary edema, uremic complications, or if you want fluid removal. Whereas in a patient with AKI, it is called renal support. There are other indications for doing RRT, like to provide nutrition, to provide fluid removal, to remove cytokines in sepsis, to treat respiratory acidosis, ARDS, and to maintain fluid balance. So the goals of therapy is to improve the organ status in AKI rather than decreasing uremia in ESRD. So the determining factor is other organ function has to be improved compared to ESRD, where only the renal organ is improvement is seen. So the indication for dialysis in AKI is mainly of renal support, whereas in ESRD it is because of renal replacement. So there are various modalities of renal replacement therapy in AKI. So intermittent hemodialysis like hemofiltration, hemodialysis, hemodiafiltration, prolonged intermittent renal replacement therapy, prolonged extended filtration, extended dialysis, extended hemodiafiltration, continuous renal replacement therapies, CVVH, CVVHD, CVVHDF. All these are the modalities of various modalities where you manage AKI through dialysis. So CRRT involves application of lower ultrafiltration rate and solute clearances for substantial periods of every day up to 24 to 36 hours. So mean operating time for CRRT is reported between 17 to 22 hours per day, although a given session can be extended as long as 72 hours. So both veno-venous technique and arteriovenous techniques are used for CRRT in a ICU patient with. So the types of continuous renal replacement therapies are slow continuous ultrafiltration, continuous hemofiltration, continuous hemodialysis, and continuous hemodiafiltration. So in continuous hemofiltration, replacement fluids are given either pre-filter or post-filter. In a continuous hemodialysis, normal hemodialysis is blood parameters and blood flow dialysis like used in like a normal dialysis, but is extended for a day or so. So continuous hemodiafiltration is a combination of filtration and hemodialysis, which is the commonly used modality which we are using in a ICU setting. So once we decided that a RRT a patient with severe AKI needs AKI, some of the studies are showing that early initiation of RRT is beneficial in improving the outcomes of patients, both mortality outcomes and dialysis free period in the next 90 days. So the first study which came is ELINE study, randomized controls trial, which said that early initiation of RRT in AKI is beneficial in improving the mortality, early mortality, and in improving the renal outcomes. Whereas the next three randomized control trials, AKIKI study, IDEAL ICU study, and START AKI study, had showed there is no particular benefit in starting RRT early compared to appropriate start of AKI. So all these studies have also cautioned that there is increased mortality if you wait for the start of AKI and if you do very late, and there is no particular benefit if RRT is started very early. So it is there is no definite black and white indication for initiation of RRT, especially CRRT in an ICU patient with AKI because of ATN. So too early may be harmful and it may cause hemodynamic instability and cause more ATN and make the patient to go into sepsis, cause more infections. Whereas in the waiting for too long may kill the patient because of AKI, because of electrolyte abnormalities or because of fluid overload. So it's daily monitoring of the patient, daily monitoring in the form of urine output, daily serum creatinine increase, other metabolic parameters like increase in the sepsis parameters. All this will dictate the timing of RRT in AKI. So coming to my last slide, take home points in AKI. Monitor serum creatine for especially at-risk patients like old age patients, patients with diabetes, patients with sepsis, in hospital admission patient with infections. Measure serum creatine daily. Make sure intake output charts are recorded correctly so that AKI is very early detected, and proper initiation of treatment for sepsis and volume replacement may prevent AKI at the initial stage. Once AKI has set in, take a detailed history, lab parameters, especially urine analysis, blood pressure monitoring, urine output monitoring, urine biochemistry analysis will help in determining the cause of AKI, either pre-renal or intrinsic renal. Imaging studies, especially ultrasound abdomen, CT abdomen without contrast, also will help in predicting or cause of post-renal AKI. As soon as the at-risk patients are identified and AKI has been identified, it's always better to stop the offending nephrotoxic agent, increase the fluid intake, relieve the obstruction, and prepare the doses of the nephrotoxic medications, adjust the doses of medicines in AKI. Yeah, thank you very much for the patient hearing. I think this is my last slide.
Dr. Nagesh Reddy, you finished up?
Yeah, finished, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your elaborative, very informative. And I think definitely students will, with all this knowledge, he can directly appear for the examination. So you have taken so much pains to deliver this lecture. Thank you very much. And now we will request all the students if they got any queries or the consultant if they want to contribute. I request them. Please take those questions if they are there and answer. If there are any questions, please, I request all of you to just to pose the questions. And or if there are any doubts, you can also get clarified from Dr. Nagesh Reddy. If there are none, I once again thank Dr. Nagesh Reddy and then Anbai for providing us this opportunity of conducting these classes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Balraj sir, for the kind invitation, giving me the opportunity to teach for the DNB students. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, sir. So we come to hello.